Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's episode of the Miriam Institute webinar. Thank you also for those of you who are listening to the recorded version of this on the podcast, the Miriam Institute podcast. I want to begin by thanking my colleague, co-founder and COO of the Institute, Rosita Panini, and also for the great work that he has done. I want to thank my great and powerful colleague, Alon for bringing this together. Today, we have the privilege of hearing from Major General retired Alon Levavi of the Israeli National Police. I want to read out Major General Levavi's resume for all of you so that you understand the caliber of the person that we have here with us today. So Major General Levavi served as a combat helicopter pilot in the Israel Air Force and later served for 34 years in the Israeli National Police. He concluded his service as Deputy Commissioner of the Israeli National Police in 2019. Among his other duties, he served as Chief of Operations, Chief of Policing, District Deputy, and spokesperson for the Israeli National Police. As head of the Police Operations Division, Levavi was responsible for operational preparedness for a number of scenarios, ranging from national emergency situations to day-to-day operational challenges. As the head of the policing division, he was responsible for the build-up and implementation of the INP's capabilities at sea, on land, and in the air. Levavi also held senior responsibility for the reinforcement and improvement of police relations with minority communities in Israel, and for the security of educational and strategic facilities within the country. He holds a bachelor's in political science and a master's of business administration. He's a graduate of the FBI Crisis Negotiation course and a graduate of the Wexner Foundation Senior Executive Program at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. We're delighted to have him here with us, to have a conversation with us from the State of Israel today. And with that, I just want to welcome you on behalf of our organization. Thank you so very much for being with us, General Levavi. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. It really is a privilege to have you here. You know, in most cases, people start in one profession, they continue in that profession, but you really started your service to the State of Israel as a pilot in the Israel Air Force. Tell us a little bit about your background so that people can understand what informs your dedication to service to the State of Israel. Where were you born? Where were you raised? Why did you decide to become a helicopter pilot? And what were some of the seminal events that took place during your service as a pilot?
So again, thank you for having me here today. It's a privilege. I was born in Ramat Gan, a major city in the central of Israel, very close by to Tel Aviv. I was raised there, and I was studying like everyone in high school, and I learned some computer science there, and I spent most of my time in the Israeli Scouts, having a great time with my friends. And like everyone else in Israel, I had to go to the army. My decision was to do the best that I can to serve the country. And in Israel, it's mandatory, you have to go to the army. So I picked the challenging course of to become a pilot. I decided to try that, and we started 400 people, the flying course, and we ended at the end, after 2.5 years, we ended something like 20 people getting our wings. So there were very 2.5 challenging years. Since then, I served 7 years in the Israeli Air Force as a combat helicopter, as you just mentioned. I flew the 500 MDs helicopters and the Cobra helicopter. And then I retired. I became a reserve pilot. And while I was a reserve pilot, I joined the Israeli Air Force. Actually, it was me and 2 other guys that we established the brand new Israeli helicopter unit, the police helicopter unit. We were 3 guys with no helicopters in the beginning, and then the helicopters arrived, and everything else is in history. And at that day, in these days, I decided that I want to reach higher as I can in the ranks, if I can say, ladders. I really wanted to be close as I can to the commissioner, even though it was a little bit maybe, a sky-high decision, but I took the decision and I did a very interesting path in the Israeli police. Not the usual path. I was a police helicopter pilot, and then I was a police station commander and the deputy commander of the crisis negotiation team, and so many things on the way. And you mentioned some of them. At the end, I became the chief of the policing department and chief of operational department. And my last position was, as you just said, the deputy commissioner. So 34 years of excitement.
So you do these 7 years in the Israeli Air Force as a helicopter pilot, and then you transitioned out and joined the Israel National Police. I'm going to ask you about that. As you said, you wanted to develop the Israeli Police Air Force, if you like. You and two other guys, you had this idea of an Air Force, but no airframes, no helicopters, no planes, no such thing. But tell me a little bit about your service in the Israeli Air Force before the police. What years were you there in the Air Force?
It was between the 1985 and 1992. At the beginning, you just learn how to fly the helicopters and how to become a combat helicopter pilot, which is like a fighter, a combat fighter. And I became the head of the OTU. It's the operational training unit of the combat helicopter squadron. Actually, all the combat helicopter pilots came and learned how to fly a combat helicopter in my small squadron. I did some operations in Lebanon in those days. There were very sensitive issues there, so we had to fly there, to combat there, and to defend the northern border of Israel. I know that you were doing some service there also in your background, so you probably know very well what I'm talking about.
I do, and of course it's coming up to the anniversary soon of the Second Lebanon War of 2006, and I know that even though my role there in 2006 took place some 14, 15 years ago, it still feels very fresh in my memories in terms of my own service there. Does your service in the Israel Air Force feel the same? Does it still beat strong within you? Does it still form a clear memory in your mindset?
I think it's for every Israeli, the time in the army is a crucial time for him. It's it's a milestone in his memories, and I will never forget the time that I was in the Israeli Air Force. It's also a great education, I believe, for young people. In the Israeli Air Force, you learn how to learn from mistakes, not do mistakes twice, and how to debrief, and how to work in a team, and how to defend your country. And you feel like this is your duty to defend your country, and it's a great, great feeling when you're doing a good job. And I think it's a memorable time. These 7 years, I will never forget them.
So one last question before I turn now to your time in the police force, and then I hope we'll get to some questions about current events and so forth. What makes an Israeli pilot? You know, it's such a highly esteemed position to hold. You gave the details of how many join in the initial phases and how many are not able to qualify. If you could sum it up in a couple of sentences, what's the common essence and ingredients that goes into becoming an Israeli Air Force pilot?
I'm not sure that there is a formula that you can say this one will become a pilot and this one will not. Even though that I think that the average characteristics of the pilots are people who really believe that their goal is to do the best that they can to serve the country, even though that it's very dangerous. And I have many friends that died over the service, crashed with their helicopters, crashed with their jets, and some of them got hit by a missile in Lebanon. But so you have to believe in what you're doing. That's the first character, I think. And you have to be very honest. You have to be very honest with yourself, to tell the truth to yourself, to learn from mistakes, not to hesitate, and to tell the truth if you did a mistake, and try to not do it twice. You have to be a person that can work together with other people, even though that pilots, they have this, maybe it's like a stigma that they are working alone. You never work alone. You have your wingmates, and you are working with 4 or 8 helicopters together, and you have the partner that is sitting next to you, or a back seat. So you're never a lone wolf. You are a team. How do you say? We're part of a team.
You're a teammate within a
Teammate. That's right.
that come together. And I'm sorry, because I said that was my last question, but I do want to ask something else I should have asked at the beginning.
Go ahead.
You were born in Ramat Gan, but where are your parents from? Where are your grandparents from? Were they born in Israel?
My father, you know what? I'll start with my mother.
Please.
Since she is Polish, she was Polish. She died already, but she passed away. But she was born in Warsaw, and she was 3 years old when she came with her grandmother to Israel, and they actually escaped just a few months before the war started in Europe in 1939. And she actually escaped with her grandmother. They arrived to Israel, and her mother came a few months later, and she was a kindergarten teacher all her life, maybe more than 30 years. She got, how do you say, the Ministry of Education gave her a prize being such a good kindergarten teacher. And that's about my mother. And my father, he was born in Israel, and he was one of the first kids of Ramat Gan. He was joining the army. Actually, it was really just the beginning of the country, in 1948 something. And he joined the army. He was in the Agana before, and he was in the first course of Shayetet 13, of the Israeli commando. I raised my
commandos.
What?
Of the Israeli Navy commandos.
Navy commander, that's right. Mm-hmm. And he was in the first course of the Israeli Navy commando, and Shayetet 13, as it's called. And so you can understand that I had no choice but to go in his path and become a good soldier.
Well, I just wonder, did your mother ever comment to you about what it meant to her that her son, after she came over from Warsaw, was a pilot in the Israeli Air Force? Did she ever comment on that? She cannot have imagined such a thing when first she fled from Europe.
She was a Polish mother. She was proud of me anyway. But I think it meant a lot to her and to my father that I became a pilot in the Israeli Air Force. And but if I was a soldier in Golani Brigade or Givati Brigade or the paratroopers, it was the same for them. If they just wanted to see me a soldier in the Israeli army. If it's a pilot, it's a soldier, it was fine with them.
So I'm going to, if time permits at the end, I'm going to try and come back to that. But let's switch now to your career in the Israeli National Police, because that doesn't just happen. You served for 7 years in the Israeli Air Force, and then you make a transition. How did you move over to the Israeli National Police? What exactly occurred there to bring you over to that?
To be honest, it was by a coincidence. I just finished my army service after 7 and something years, and like every other Israeli young boy, I intended to go to travel around the globe, India, South America, and so on. And I met someone that really in coincidence, I met someone, they told me that they are just about to establish a new helicopter unit in the Israel National Police. So after this conversation, it took me a month to wear the uniforms of the Israeli police, to get my new ranks, and to become one of the three first pilots in the Israeli National Police. It was on my way to India, but it stopped in Jerusalem as an Israeli police pilot.
Can you tell us something about the capabilities that the Air Force of the Israeli National Police have, and what their involvement is in the day-to-day security, law enforcement, and protection of the state?
Since it was established in 1992, the Israeli, it's called before the helicopter unit, but today it's much more than helicopters. We started with 2 helicopters, Bell 206 helicopters, and today it's a very big organization, like a small air force. It has, the Israeli police has 6 brand new helicopters, 4 of them single engine, and 2 of them are twin engine helicopters. We have more than, we have like 14 airplanes, and we are using them to combat huge fires, forest fires. We have 2 small aircrafts that we use them for special missions. And actually, while I was the head of the operational division, I established a new drone fleet for the Israeli police. And the Israeli police today use more than 120 drones all over the country in special missions, simple missions, and so on. So it's become really a small Air Force.
And so let's go a little bit more into your career. You and I were talking the other day, and you made mention of the fact that the Israeli National Police, in terms of its composition, mission statement, and everything that it has to deal with, is really a unique police force globally, I think. Tell us a bit about what makes the Israeli National Police so unique in your mindset when compared to other police forces throughout the world.
You know, I traveled all over the world, and I visited many police organizations in the United States, in the Far East, and so on. And the Israeli National Police is really unique. But it's unique because the Israeli state is unique. And the situation that we live in is a unique situation. And in such a complicated situation, you need very special solutions. So the Israeli police is actually in charge not only on the policing classic issues that other police organizations are doing all over the world. The Israeli police is also in charge of fighting terrorism and keeping the internal security of the public inside the borders of Israel. The army is in charge from the borders outside and on Judea and Samaria. And the Israeli police is in charge inside the borders of Israel for all the internal security. We are dealing with riots, we are dealing with traffic, we are dealing with car accidents, and we are dealing with terrorism, which is very unique to Israel. The Israeli police is 30,000 police officers all around with 30,000 volunteers, which is also unique. People that are finished their daily day work, coming home, putting their uniforms and coming to volunteer in the Israeli police.
You know, that's an amazing description that you've just given there. And what's particularly standing out to me is that's not a high figure. 30,000 members of the Israel National Police total. How, and plus the volunteer force, which is an equivalent size, how do you effectively bring that number to a position whereby they can be deployed to really take charge of so many challenges, oversee so many challenges, and keep a country entire safe and secure when it comes to domestic threats? How exactly is that 30,000 being catalyzed into such an effective police force?
The Israeli police is divided to 7 districts. Each district has its own people. It's around 2,000, maybe 3,000 police officers in every district. Every district is unique and has different characterized or it's different. For example, if you are talking about the southern district, it's close by to the Gaza Strip, so there are these issues. If you are talking about the northern district, it's the border with Lebanon and maybe the Syria in the Golan Heights, and it's the Druze and the Christians and the Jewish. It's very complicated. And if you're talking about the Jerusalem district, it's a different story. It's the Temple Mount. It's very complicated situation between Muslims and Jewish and the Eastern Jerusalem, and it's very complicated. But we are dealing with all these issues with only 30,000 police officers because we know how to move the police officers all around the country. If we have a major operation, let's say in the Meron Mountain or in Jerusalem, we can bring people or police officers from the different districts to a certain time to Jerusalem. They will do their time there for maybe 1 or 2 days, and they will come back to their own district. So it's it's really an art of moving people from one place to another and to use your human resources the best that you can.
And so one of the things that's in the headlines right now, Alon, is there is a certain degree of controversy surrounding exchange programs between, frankly, American police forces and the State of Israel, whereby there's an exchange of information, intelligence, best practices. Some people have even suggested that the technique that was used by the police officer who apprehended and seemingly murdered George Floyd in Minneapolis was a technique that was taught by the Israeli National Police. And I just want to make it clear, that's completely false. There's no truth to that. Firstly, do you agree with that, or do you take a different view?
I agree with that totally. Each one of the police organization has their own techniques and their own rules. And there are delegations from Israel that are coming to the United States and from the United States to Israel, but we never teach something which is against the law. We have, I think, like all the police organization all over the world have the same goal, is to save lives.
And so tell us about, I don't want us to be sidetracked by the slanders and the scandals and the false narratives that people put out about the State of Israel. I would like you, though, to tell people what's the value of an exchange program? What is Israel giving to the incoming delegations from police forces from around the world to enable them to do their work in the best way possible? What's Israel's contribution to global policing, if you could tell me?
I can tell you that I think that since 9/11, the entire world understood that the terrorism can hit everywhere. It can be the Twin Towers, it can be the Pentagon, and it can be in New Delhi or Bombay and other places. It's a global war against terrorism. And the Israeli police I'm proud of it, but I'm not glad that it's the situation. We gain a lot of experience combating terrorism, even if it's the lonely wolf that coming with a knife in the streets of Jerusalem, or it's a suicide bomber entering a bus or a pizzeria in a quiet neighborhood. So the police is working together with the Shin Bet, is working together with the intelligence organizations. It's working together very close with the Israeli army and with the volunteers. And the whole system is giving a very good solution, I think, for combating terrorism. I think the police officers that are coming from all over the world learn from the Israeli police how to deal with terrorism, how to join forces together between organizations, how to cooperate, how to share intelligence and how to share information, and how to deal with terrorism. I think this is one of the best things that police organizations can gain from coming to Israel. And if I can add one more thing, it's not only on the side of combating terrorism. I think the community policing in Israel is a very good model for policing all over the world. We are very involved with the community, with the different communities, with the Orthodox religious, with the Ethiopian people that came, Israeli Ethiopian, came from Ethiopia not long ago, with the Christians and with the Druze and with the Muslims. It's we know how to do that, and I think it's working very well.
You know, it's so important that people are hearing that from you, that people understand that contrary to the really scandalous and absurd allegations launched against the relationship between the Israeli National Police and other police forces from around the world, you're not in the business of teaching people how to take lives. You're in the business really of helping law enforcement around the world to save lives. It sounds like that's what you're saying.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%.
So one more question that I'd like to ask before we quickly flip to COVID-19, which I see unfortunately is back with a rather a vengeful spike within the state of Israel, which is obviously something distressing to everybody who holds the country dear to their hearts. But before we come to that, you've made mention to this concept of lone wolves. Now, you're actually making mention of it in a different context. You're saying that there's no such thing as a pilot who's a lone wolf who operates alone. There's no such thing as a unit whereby people are operating in isolation. A few years ago, I believe in 2015, we saw what some called, I personally am not of the view, I'd be much more interested in your view, what some people called the stabbing intifada.
Yes.
This was supposed to be a series of attacks undertaken by lone wolves. That's where we heard that phrase time and again. But I recall the Israeli National Police making it very, very clear that that was not their view, that these were not lone wolf attacks, that in fact these were people who were incited, and you became the leaders on the monitoring of social media, not just individual accounts, but also trying to hold to account those companies and organizations and corporations that run the social media platforms, to explain to them that what they're allowing on their site has repercussions and can actually result in the deaths of innocent individuals. Can you talk to us a bit about that? So number one, is the idea of a lone wolf terror attack in the context of those stabbings a true idea, a true and reasonable description? And what was your work to curb the incitement that you saw on social media?
I'll start with the first question about the phrase lone wolf. We used it a lot since we saw a person which was alone coming with a knife and trying to stab the people in the crossing borders and in the streets of Jerusalem and in many other places. Sometimes they really were alone, and sometimes it came from their own motivation and with nobody in the background. But you have to remember that it's all about the atmosphere. nobody is living in a vacuum. Nobody is living in the out of space. They are living in the streets of the West Bank, and they are reading the newspaper, and they are reading their propaganda actually against Israel. And it was we found out, and it's not a new thing, that it already was proven that their educational system, their books and their materials of studying is full of hate. And if you are born to a society that educate people to hate the Israelis, if you are a young kid and you're raised to this atmosphere, you are not a lone wolf at the end. It's maybe thousands of people that are standing in your back and pushing you to do the attack. And that's related to the second question that you were asking, which is the social media. And I'm really familiar with the social media since I was the Israeli police spokesperson. Yes. And the propaganda and how do you say hasata?
Incitement. The
incitement that goes on the social media, if it's Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or whatever. These people, which are probably the psychological background is not the most stable, they influence badly from this propaganda and from these incitements. And finally, you find them in the streets with a knife, and even that they know that at the end they will die, since someone will stop them. They still were coming again and again and again. It was all the fuel was the social media, and that was the result. Hundreds of people that were influenced by this incitement. And we were trying to negotiate with these companies and try to take down these terrible posts with the cartoons and with films that it's unbelievable. And eventually, they started to understand that freedom of speech and freedom of speech is not stand for them, and they have to take off these terrible posts.
So you were the Israeli National Police is seeing this incitement. These include videos that are teaching people how to stab, how to twist a knife, how to kill innocents, and people who are not in any way, shape, or form related in many cases to the defense establishment or the security establishment. And you're having to convince organizations, for example, like a Facebook and like others, that what is posted up there has real ramifications for people's lives. Do you think that they understood that? Do you think that they understood the severity of what could occur as a result of what they are allowing to have posted on these social media networks? And the last question on that, do you think that there needs to be an overhaul generally when it comes to social media for the sake and security and well-being of society writ large?
I'm not sure that I understood the last part.
Do you feel that there needs to be a change in the principles of the social media platforms in order to ensure a safer, more healthy, more happy society? Because it's not about terrorism. I ask you this as a father, I ask you this as somebody who's served the state of Israel for the best of your career, the best parts of your career. We hear now about school children who maybe fall prey to bullying in the schoolyard, but whereas in the past that would end once they came into their home, now they continue to be bullied by way of social media, which comes to their cell phone even when they're in their parental home. Do you think that there needs to be some sort of change there, Alon, not just to counter terror, but also for a happier, healthier society?
I will refer to the first part of your question. the Ministry of Internal Security, the former minister, Gilad Ardan, he was also fighting the BDS for entire career, and he actually did a great job doing that. And the battle against this incitement in the social media was in his yard, I can say. We as a police gave him the information, and he tried to do his best against, or trying to deal with these companies, with these mega companies, and to try to take these posts off the social network. But to your second part of the question, yes, I think that the social media companies like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and so on, they need to take some more responsibility. It's a platform that everybody can say anything about anything. And sometimes it's really dangerous, especially for young children that can be influenced very fast from things that they see on the network, and they cannot judge if it's true or it's fake news, as we used to say today. So it's very complicated, since I know that the freedom of speech is so important to so many companies, but I think they have to find the balance between right and wrong, between everything is allowed and everything is not allowed. There is a very delicate line in the middle, and they have to be much more responsible for the stuff that's going on there.
So let's turn now for the last few minutes that we have to COVID-19. We looked at how Israel managed the crisis there, and we looked at the role of the army, or the Israeli military actually, and the Israeli National Police, and it looked very much to those who follow the headlines and read the articles that Israel, as we very much hoped, was going to get this situation under control swiftly, and then we saw them move to reopen the economy, really. Now it's looking very, very ominous. Now we saw that clubs, gyms, social gatherings, all of these places are either closed or limited. There's now a feeling, a sense that we might revert to massive closures once again. Remember, the first time around, the quarantine was implemented in a very gradual sense. It could be that we're at the beginning of another gradual quarantine. What's going on there in Israel? Why has it been such a challenge to really build upon the great progress made in the beginning? And why has Israel seen fit to rush back to closing many of the sites, areas, and venues where people will typically gather?
I was really involved at the beginning at the command center of the national command center of trying to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. And I can tell you that it was great to see how different organizations trying to put all their efforts to try to stop the pandemic and to flatten the curve of the sick people. It was very unclear. This whole issue of the virus was very unclear. What's going to happen? What's going to be in the future? Are we going to live again? It's the same as we lived before. And we organized slowly but surely, and we actually did quite a good job at the beginning. And then after, I think it was around April or May, the damage to the economy was enormous. And the government understood that they must find the balance between the closure and the quarantine and the social distance and the economy, the issues of health on the one side and the issues of economy on the other side. And I think it was a right decision to open the market again, or open the businesses again. But I think that maybe it was a little bit too fast. And now we have to learn from our own mistakes. I can tell you that every day now in Israel, we find around 800, 1,000 new people that got the COVID-19 virus. But we don't see a dramatic rise on people who needs to be ventilated, or people that needs which are in a critical situation. So we need to learn from our mistakes. Now we are closing again a little bit. We're trying to find a balance between economy and health. It's like a tango dance, one step forward, two steps backwards, but it's a very challenging issue. I think that the Israeli society ran out from the closure to the parties and to the beach. It's summer here. Everybody wants to go to the beach, and it's really challenging to keep people in social distance and their homes, not meeting their grandfather and grandmother. It's really challenging.
Alon, two very quick questions, if you could answer them in brief, and then we'll wrap up this interview, this conversation. Question number one, what do you think are the challenges post-COVID, as a result of COVID, that await Israeli society? And you may even like to globalize that. I'd be happy if you would. That's the first question. Tell us about that. Some of the things that you see on the horizon that maybe aren't receiving sufficient focus or need to receive more focus.
What was the second part? I'm sorry.
Just really, what do you see as some of the challenges in a post-COVID environment?
Okay.
Not just in Israel, but even globally, that you think people need to be keeping more of an eye on?
Okay. You know that I think that in every threat there are opportunities, and I believe that we will need to learn how to live in the shadow of the virus for a long time. It's here to stay. It's not going to go away, and we will have to learn how to live with the virus, or aside in the shadow of the virus. And in my opinion, we will do many things differently, like distance learning. We will work from distance. We will use the Zoom like we are doing right now. And I think that maybe good stuff is coming up from this issue. For example, we won't see so many cars on the roads, since you can work from home, and you can spend more time with your families. And the society will change a little bit, I think, even though the basic needs of people to meet each other, I think that will stay forever. That's a basic need. I think we will see more technology for everything, for distance medicine, or in the health. You won't be forced to go to the doctor. The doctor will come meet you over the Zoom, for example. Or so in many places we'll see things happen from distance, and we will have to change our behavior a little bit. But basically, we will stay human persons, and we will need to be together.
So I have one last question that I don't necessarily have all the time that I would have liked to assign to your answer here. So forgive me for asking you to respond briefly. The role of the commissioner of the Israeli National Police is one that really should be filled, according to most people's observations. At the moment, we have what's called the Mamale Makom, which is essentially an acting commissioner of the Israeli.
Acting commissioner, yeah.
What are some of the challenges in finding a permanent commissioner? Why do we need a permanent commissioner? What's the advantage of having that? And finally, if you could tell me, what do you want to see in a future commissioner of the Israeli National Police in terms of their character, their experience? Would you insist, for example, that they were drawn from within the Israeli National Police, or do you think that they could come from outside? If you could just comment on that briefly, I think a lot of people would be interested in your expert view.
I believe that every police officer all over the world will agree with me that to be a police officer, it's a profession. You have to go through all the way from police officer to commissioner. In my own belief that you cannot be a commissioner without being a police officer before. So that's for the last question. And I really believe that the Israeli police deserve a commissioner in a full-time job and in a nominated commissioner and not an acting commissioner. Exactly like that it's, I think it will be, nobody can imagine the Israeli Defense Force without the chief of staff, which is nominated. So I think the government must nominate a commissioner, but the police is working very well with Moti, which is a very good friend of mine. He's doing a great job, and I wish him all the best.
Well, thank you so very much. And I'd love to have spent more time with you, but I know that you have some limitations on your availability today, which will not surprise anyone. I've certainly learned from you. I've enjoyed the conversation. We're very proud to have you as an expert on the Miriam Institute. And I look forward to publishing articles by you and hopefully, with your permission, to hosting you for further interviews. Thank you so very much, Alon, not just for your time now, but for everything you've given to the country militarily and in terms of law enforcement. And I know, and perhaps this can be the subject of a future conversation, you're still very engaged in caring for, looking after, and improving the lives of Israel's citizens. And I know that the know-how and the expertise that you have is something that really would be well served if it could be exported to destinations throughout the international community. I really do think that. And so on behalf of me, on behalf of Rosita Panini, our co-founder, and my great and powerful colleague, Alon Langer, I say thank you so very much. Be healthy and be safe. And I hope to see you on the other side of this pandemic in person very soon indeed.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. Thank you and the Miriam Institute for everything that you are doing for Israel, to you and your staff and your team. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.